The Shadows of Eilean Mor. In the vast and tumultuous expanse of the Atlantic Ocean lies Eilean Mor, the largest of the Flannan Isles, a seemingly desolate, rocky outcrop that has held sway over the imaginations of sailors, historians, and the superstitious alike. Since the construction of its lighthouse in 1899, this sentinel has not only served as a beacon of hope for ships navigating treacherous waters, but also as a foreboding presence for the men destined to guard its light. Renowned for its engineering brilliance, the lighthouse nonetheless casts long, dark shadows, concealing within its walls tales of bravery, loss, and enigma. At the heart of this haunting narrative are the lighthouse keepers: James Ducat, grizzled by the storms of both the sea and his past; Thomas Marshall, burdened by the guilt of survival; and Donald MacArthur, wrestling with the ghosts of his own heart as he places duty above all else. Each man brought with him a rich tapestry of experience and sorrow that intertwined to create a unique bond. Yet as they went about their day-to-day work, little did they know that their loyalty to the lighthouse would plunge them into a harrowing saga, a realm where the mundane collides with the supernatural. On one fateful December night, a tempest would rise, shaking the foundations of their reality and casting them into a struggle against the elements. Whispers echoed through the clifftop winds, beckoning echoes of the past into the present, awakening ancient tales that lay dormant. Tales of lost souls, restless spirits, and deep-seated fears that entwined with the very fabric of Eilean Mor. Eilean Mor, the largest of the Flannan Isles, rose majestically against the backdrop of a stormy sky. Its lighthouse a white sentinel standing guard against the relentless Atlantic waves. Built in 1899, it was designed to weather the fiercest storms. Each night, its light, which flashed 2 white signals every 30 seconds, served as both a lifeline for lost sailors on turbulent seas and, paradoxically, a stark prison for its dedicated keepers. This night, however, would herald a reckoning that none could have foreseen. James Ducat, tall and broad-shouldered, with a chiseled face weathered by years of facing fierce storms, stood at the window, peering into the encroaching darkness. Once a fisherman like many of his contemporaries, James had relinquished that life after a near-fatal incident at sea involving a fierce squall. The ocean had claimed his brother, and James had vowed to keep mariners safe by becoming a lighthouse keeper instead. That night, however, unease gnawed at him. The wind carried a bitter chill that suggested something far beyond mere weather. "It's growing fierce out there," James said, adjusting the kerosene lantern with hands that now trembled slightly, recalling the moment when he lost his brother to the vengeful sea. His voice echoed against the stone walls, thick with memories of lost lives and ships that had gone down in that same dark abyss. "Ah, give it a rest, James," replied Thomas Marshall, leaning against the damp stone wall, his wiry frame silhouetted against the waning light. Thomas was known for his quick wit and adventurous spirit, traits that often led him into trouble back on the mainland. Raised in a small coastal village, he had spent his childhood listening to tales of the sea, legends about mermaids and haunted shipwrecks. What good will it do if the sea decides to throw a tantrum? Better to keep our heads down and let the light do its job. Despite his carefree demeanor, Thomas battled his own demons. He still bore the scars of a tragic shipwreck during his youth, an event that had claimed the lives of several of his friends. It had haunted him for years, and he often felt more comfortable laughing about it than confronting the guilt that clung to him like a heavy fog. Then there was Donald MacArthur, the third keeper, whose stocky frame and thick beard presented a more reassuring figure. Hailing from the Isle of Lewis, Donald had settled in Eilean Mor to escape the pain of losing his wife to illness. His memories of family kept him strong. His 2 young daughters, waiting on the mainland, filled his mind with warmth, yet he struggled against the loneliness of life as a keeper. "You two jest, but the sea is unpredictable, especially in winter. I'd rather be prepared than caught unaware." Donald's strong hands had become accustomed to heavy labor, but his heart ached under the weight of the decision to leave his children behind. They worked together through the evening, the atmosphere inside the lighthouse thickening with unspoken fears as the storm clouds gathered ominously overhead. Each keeper settled into his routine, iron tools clanging against stone, as they checked machinery and logged their observations in worn pages of their logbook. Donald's mind wandered back to his daughters, their laughter a soft melody that lingered in his heart while the shadows crept around them. It was supposed to be a comforting presence, yet tonight the shadows felt alive, writhing in corners and whispering secrets. The wind picked up, rattling the windows like restless spirits trying to get their attention. Thomas broke the mood, creating a facade of laughter. "If it gets too bad, which one of you wants to be the first to make a run for it to the village?" "Not a chance," James replied, his tone firm, sense of responsibility outweighing his fear of the unknown. "We're at our post. If we leave, then who'll tend to the light?" "Let's be honest, we may not be here much longer," Thomas exclaimed with a chuckle that faltered as he realized there was little humor in the darkness surrounding them. Donald rubbed his beard thoughtfully and ventured, "What if the sea has come for us? My mother always spoke of the spirits of the sea, and it feels as if they're watching us tonight." It was meant to be a jest, but the air hung heavy afterward, chilled by the sudden flicker of the lantern above, casting fleeting shadows that seemed to stretch ominously around them. Their banter dissolved into silence as each keeper retreated inward, ensnared by the tense atmosphere that thickened like fog. As the days leading into December advanced, an unsettling chill permeated the air around Eilean Moor, intensifying alongside the stormy weather. The lighthouse, once a steadfast beacon, began to feel haunted by the specters of the past, a memento of lives lost to the sea. On an especially dreary evening, Thomas sat at the weather-beaten table, staring into the stormy sea, feeling it claw at his insides. "Do you hear that?" he asked suddenly, breaking the oppressive silence. The eerie whistling of the wind seemed to carry an almost human quality, an echo of voices lost to time. "It's as if the island is speaking to us tonight." James, meticulously examining the logbook, felt an involuntary shiver race down his spine. "You're imagining things, Thomas," he said, though the unease gnawed at him. He had heard the old wives' tales of the keepers before them, how they had disappeared without a trace, drawn away by the pull of the sea. "It's just the wind." "No, I felt it as well," Donald added, his voice low but steady. He often sensed the unexplainable and had a profound respect for energies of the natural world. No mere gust could carry such a weight. "The air feels thick with something ominous." He shared the stories of his own ancestors, whispers in the night telling of spirits that lingered along the jagged shores, compelling sailors to abandon their vessels in favor of the sea's embrace. Thomas leaned in closer, his adventurous spirit alight. "Last week I was certain I saw flashes of light near the cliffs, moments that flickered and vanished." He recalled the haunting luminescence that had beckoned him during an unnaturally dark night. "I thought nothing of it until now. A warning, perhaps?" James straightened, an uncomfortable thought surfacing. "You know the locals have spoken of strange happenings," he reminded them. "Stories of light flickering over the cliffs, but never being of this world. It's just tales to scare the children, or is it?" "They're not just tales," Donald insisted, a hard edge to his voice. "Every time the storm grows, strange things happen near the cliffs. If the spirits linger, it's not for our good." The tension in the air was palpable, an invisible thread that bound the three men to one another with both fear and camaraderie. As the wind howled and the lantern flickered ominously, they each felt a unique, shared bond, a shadow of something supernatural pulling them into an uncertain fate. That night, as the winds whistled through the cracks of the lighthouse, tendrils of unexplainable energies wrapped around the keepers, whispering secrets that seemed to resonate deep within the stones themselves. The eerie atmosphere settled, thickening and elongating into palpable dread, a tight grip that enshrouded them in a dark prophecy for the days to unfold. December 15th, 1900, dawned ominously, the scent of sea salt mingling with the electric tension in the air, as if the very atmosphere were charged with otherworldly forces. Clouds gathered like an army above Eilean Moor, dark and brooding, casting shadows that seemed to dance malevolently over the cliffs. As the storm approached, it felt less like a natural occurrence and more like a manifestation of something ancient and restless, eager to reclaim what it had lost. "Brace yourselves," James Ducat shouted over the howling wind, his voice barely piercing the eerie quiet that descended. The air felt thick, vibrating with an energy that left an unsettling prickling at the nape of his neck. We need to secure everything before it hits. Donald MacArthur, looking out towards the encroaching squall, felt that inexplicable chill creep into his bones, tightening around his heart. "This isn't just a storm," he muttered, brow furrowed. "It's as if the very sea is alive, angry with those who dare to linger at its edge." Thomas Marshall, ever the skeptic, chaotically scanned the horizon, incredulity etched in his features. "What blather is that? The sea is just nature at work, riled up as always. But look." His gaze shifted toward the cliffs, where ominous flickering lights began to appear, drowning the darkness in a spectral glow that seemed to beckon them closer. "Do you see that? Flames dancing atop the cliffs, like some strange signal." As those flickering lights flickered and pulsed, something indecipherable thrummed within the surrounding air, raising the hairs on the back of their necks. James tightened his grip on the lantern, a mixture of dread and intrigue tugging at his gut. "It could be just lights reflecting off the storm," he suggested, though uncertainty crept into his voice, the swell of fear crashing against his rational thought. But Donald shook his head, gripping the railing as the wind howled more violently, as if trying to swallow their words. "Number those as signals, or spirits perhaps." As each man grappled with rising anxiety, the atmosphere in the lighthouse shifted further. Shadows twisted along the walls, danced in a macabre ballet that felt alive, slipping into familiar shapes that clawed at their memory. The wind shrieked, intertwining with the ghosts of their traumatic pasts, faint echoes of loss that rose from the depths of their minds. James felt his heart race as visions of his brother washed over him, an image of laughter quickly morphing into a panic-stricken face, beckoning him through the rain-soaked fog of despair. He closed his eyes tightly against the vivid memories, but they surged forth with a malevolent ferocity. "How could I have let him go?" he whispered, guilt pooling within him like an anchor ensnaring his soul. Next to him, Thomas gripped the table, glancing around wildly, his adventurous bravado cracking under the dread of haunting memories. Images of friends lost in a shipwreck tore through his mind, their echoes blending with the overwhelming sound of the storm outside. "No, no," he urged, trying to ground himself in the present. "I didn't deserve to survive. It should have been me." An invisible force coiled around them, thickening the air as the shadows dimmed and clung tightly to their spirits. "We need to secure the lantern," Donald shouted suddenly, though his voice trembled, pulling them deeper into the maelstrom of their minds. He imagined his daughters' faces, twisted in uncertainty and fear, longing for their father lost to both duty and circumstance. "Stay focused," James barked as he reached for the lantern. But the whispers grew louder, merging with the howling winds, a cacophony of past regrets that swirled in a haunting harmony. "They're pulling at us. We need to resist." And then, as though the lighthouse itself sensed their turmoil, the lantern flickered violently, casting eerie shadows that danced chaotically around them. The unsettling lights on the cliffs seemed to pulse closer, now illuminating the very crags and cliffs like glowing specters urging them to the edge, neither alive nor completely vanquished. Just as the tension surged to a breaking point, a blinding radiance engulfed the lighthouse, drowning out all shadows, all fear. The colors were sharp and vibrant, contrasting against the dark storm as if the storm itself had surrendered. The tempest outside stilled as if it had never existed. The winds fell silent, leaving only the sound of their own ragged breathing. The light enveloped them inside the cabin, weaving threads of warmth and serenity throughout their strained hearts. They stood transfixed, eyes squinting against the brilliance, emerging from the haze of their minds to find a profound and inexplicable calm settling upon them. In that moment, the haunting memories faded, brushed aside by an overwhelming sense of hope. The light overwhelming, drawing them from the depths of despair and plunging them into a new reality, one that promised clarity amid the chaos. As the storm abated, the ethereal glow flickered once more, hinting at the promise of untold mysteries yet to unfold. Days passed with agonizing slowness, darkness gripping Eilean Mor without respite. The lighthouse remained silent, a bastion of both stability and desolation, but for Joseph and the villagers, it became a beacon signifying loss. The steamer Hesperus docked as villagers stirred with dread, thick unease permeating every inch of the harbour. Yearning to discover the fate of their fellow keepers, Captain Harvey scrutinized the lighthouse. Static hummed through the air as dark clouds congregated overhead like an ominous gathering of grief-stricken souls. "Something is off," he muttered, fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. "They should have signaled us by now. We must investigate the lighthouse." When the crew arrived, Joseph stood on the shore, pooling dread into his heart. Familiar dread was etched into his features, reminiscent of his mother's warnings about restless spirits. "What's gone wrong?" he called, looking towards the lighthouse with a deep sense of foreboding. "Just you wait," Captain Harvey said, his brow knitted with concern. "Let's hope for the best, but prepare for the worst." As they approached, it was evident that something was profoundly wrong. The door flapped eerily in the wind, as if beckoning them into the elements of the past. "James, Thomas, Donald, anyone here?" Joseph shouted as he stepped forward, but the wind swallowed his voice whole, leaving only an unsettling silence. Inside, the air was musty, thick with a petrichor tinged by something decaying. A meal lay untouched on the table, a half-eaten loaf of bread and soft cheese, foreboding evidence of the men's last moments. A rustling sound filled the small space, whispers echoing against the damp stone, raising the fine hairs on Joseph's neck. "Could they be here?" he whispered to himself, straining to listen for any answers. He moved cautiously, heart pounding, and as he entered the lantern room, the atmosphere shifted. The air became heavy, almost electric, a feeling he could hardly explain. Shadows flickered in the corner of his eye, merging and separating as if they were alive. "James, Thomas, Donald," he called again, echoing through the abyss. The logbook lay open on the table, its pages fluttering eerily. He reached for it, noticing the last entries had an unsettling urgency. Each line trembled with an energy of its own, a desperate urgency captured just before the storm. The final scrawls hinted at struggles among the keepers, a fraught presence that could only have been born out of fear. As Joseph penned his findings in the log, a distant crash echoed through the lighthouse. His heart leapt as he turned abruptly, an unexplained terror coursing through him. "They must be out there," he muttered. Feeling compelled, he stepped outside, the instinct to call out growing. The elements loomed ominously, coaxing him toward the shore, where shadows flickered under the waves, faint, ghostly handprints pressing against the rocks. But nothing emerged from the depths. Only that bone-chilling sensation wrapped around him, echoing with whispers of those trapped within. As night fell, the lantern above flickered, and the lighthouse lit the path between the realms. Nightmares and spirits sought to take form. In the days following the disappearance, rumors swirled like storm clouds above Island Moor, thickening into a haze of speculation and folklore. Mary Ducat, James's wife, joined a throng of concerned women in the village hall, where whispers of fear quickly transformed into wild tales that flitted like bats in the night. Clinging to a photograph of James, she felt frayed nerves tugging at her spirit. "He wouldn't leave us," she murmured fiercely, her voice trembling with the weight of grief. "James is committed. He wouldn't vanish without reason." "But a storm like that, the sea is unrelenting," another woman interjected, her words weaving through the tapestry of despair that veiled their gathering. Each woman bore the burden of unanswered questions. The wounds refused to heal as uncertainty snaked through the community. Mary's face hardened, the fierce protective instincts for her children merging with the desperate longing for her husband. Perhaps a tragedy struck. They deserve more than mere speculation. Her indignation ran deep. She fought to preserve the memory of her husband in light, refusing to let shadows claim him unto despair. "An accident, then?" Robert Muirhead, the superintendent, suggested, his deep-set eyes glistening with sorrow. "The conditions were treacherous. They left the light to secure themselves. But what if—" His words fell off into the silence, the understanding that swept the room like a chill. Villagers shared their own accounts, emboldened by the shared loss, tales of glowing specters haunting the cliffs around the lighthouse, flickering lights beckoning them to the sea's edge. The spirits of the keeper's ancestors, perhaps, Another piped up. Our families have long spoken of spirits guarding lost sailors and drawing them near. As days morphed into weeks, routines turned to rituals. Memorial services were held, bringing the community together in mourning, adorned with candles whose flames flickered nervously as if resonant with a fleeting hope. Each disappearance cast a long shadow over the hearts of those who remained. The lighthouse glimmered dimly, its once steadfast column now an embodiment of sorrow wrapped in isolation. It stood as a harbinger of fate, a testament to the eternal watch one might keep. But what lay beyond in the depths of the once familiar sea was no comfort. The months turned into years, and the disappearance of the Flannan Isle keepers transformed into legend, their story becoming deeply interwoven with the fabric of Island Moor. Tales of shadows whispered among the fishermen, their voices laced with the weight of superstition. "I swear I've seen lights near the cliffs," one fisherman insisted, shivering at the memory, flickering like souls lost to the waves, pleading for a safe harbor. "Some say the keepers never truly left," the barmaid said, breaking her silence. She had always been captivated by local lore, an uncanny sparkle shone in her eye as she spoke. "That their souls are bound to the lighthouse, still attempting to guide the lost home." Yet buried within each subscriber's tale was trepidation, an omnipresent fear that whispered of the lighthouse's dark and haunting truths. Amidst heavy storms, the thing that was once the heart of mariners transformed into a shrine. Each night, as thunder rolled, Joseph set about his duties with a heavy heart. He vowed to honor the original keepers by keeping the light burning brightly, even as tales of their tragic fate clawed at his resolve. It was on one particularly stormy night that Joseph felt something shift within the lighthouse. Goosebumps crept along his arms as he climbed the narrow spiral staircase. The air grew thick, vibrating with an energy he couldn't quite identify, a mix of fear and familiarity that settled over him like a shroud. It was as though he could feel the presence of those who had come before him, James, Thomas, and Donald, guiding him towards something greater than himself. Suddenly, a soft clicking sounded from above, like the echoes of long-forgotten footsteps. He glanced around, feeling the urge to cry out, but something in the air held him inward. As he reached the lantern room, the shadows converged, swirling lightly around him, a benevolent brush against his skin. "James, is that you?" he whispered, hesitantly addressing the flickering shadows that teased along the walls. A deep sigh filled the room. It was heavy and bittersweet, echoing the memories of the lost. Though no figure appeared before him, a sense of camaraderie warmed Joseph's heart, as if the shadows of his predecessors were watching over him. He felt compelled to peer out over the cliffs, and as he did, pierced through thick clouds, beams of ethereal white light danced just above the waves. A flicker of hope amid the storm. In that breathtaking moment, Joseph could almost hear whispered words, an encouragement born from the keepers who had inspired the lighthouse to stand firm amidst chaos. Every storm that followed, he could feel them with him. Together they fought, enduring the relentless winds and torrential rains, an enduring pact forged across the ocean, a testament to duty, sacrifice, and the ethereal ties that bound them all to the light of Island Moor. As the years trudged on, interest in the disappearance of the Flannan Isle keepers only intensified. The mystery surrounding Island Moor stoked the imaginations of historians, scholars, and paranormal enthusiasts alike, provoking theories that rippled through time like waves across the sea. One prominent theory suggested that the keepers had perished in the storm, swept away by rough winds and treacherous waves before they could secure the lighthouse. The logbook entries hinted at a frantic decision-making process where the trio strove to keep the light lit, even as the raging tempest threatened to extinguish it. Scholars combed through historical records for similar tragedies, linking their disappearance to parallels in maritime history. Others pointed to the lingering folklore of the island. Island Moor was steeped in tales of the supernatural, and many believed that local spirits were drawn to the lighthouse, their flickering light haunting the very cliffs where mariners had lost their own lives. Ghost hunters visited the site, hoping to capture something transient. Orbs of light and floating whispers, feeling that perhaps the keepers had found eternal rest among the ghosts of the sea. Investigations into the lighthouse revealed other tensions, specifically regarding emergency protocols, or lack thereof, during extreme weather conditions. Many criticized the lax approaches espoused by keepers of the day, suggesting that the Flannan Isles needed better communication channels to the mainland. Reforms were initiated, ensuring future keepers and their protection against Eilean Mor's wrath. As memorial services and gatherings became commonplace, local historians curated the tales of the keepers, crafting an understanding of their lives and legacies that transcended mere folklore. They created a tradition that honored the virtues of steadfast commitment, courtesy, and bravery. With every storm that battered the cliffs, the stories of lost souls flourished, and the lighthouse remained an enduring monument, a beacon woven with darkness and light, accepting the linear tales of grit while dancing in shadow. The spirits of James, Thomas, and Donald lingered still, primed to guard, guide, and share their tales, as keeperhood had its own legends taking shape, an ethereal beacon defining the whispered voices of the deep, forever enshrined in mystery.